At the top of the news track, let's focus on Kyiv. Russia's capital city braces for massive attacks by the Russian army as its one bustling suburbs now lie in ruins amid the death, destruction and rubble. Here's a report from Ground Zero in Kyiv.
A TV tower razed in a heart-stopping aerial strike. Rescue workers rummaging through piles of mangled buildings, hoping against hope to find survivors. Once bustling neighborhoods devastated and burning for hours together after Russian troops rained fire from the sky. Amid the deaths, destruction and rubble, India Today remains the last channel still reporting from Kyiv, which is now a ghost city. Deep inside the devastating war zone, India Today's Gaurav Sawant spoke to civilian soldiers readying a last stand to resist invading Russians.
We are at a picket at a checkpoint, and multiple such checkpoints have been set up to defend Kyiv from the imminent Russian invasion. And with me are members of this checkpoint defense team. What they have in their hands, and look very closely, these are Molotov cocktails or petrol bombs being made right here. They're being made by the women and used by the men here. Just with Molotov cocktails, how will you defend your neighborhood? How will you defend Kyiv?
Нам не страшно, мы не боимся. Мы их передушим при помощи коктейлей Молотова.
They are not afraid. They are not afraid for Russians. They are not afraid. Even without weapons, without petrol bombs, they are ready for war. So they don't have any problem. Even they don't have any bomb or any weapon.
A round of the city catches the images of ruin all around.
You know, as we drive through the city, we are just trying to show you virtually every corner of Kyiv today, because this is what the world is fearing, that there would be an attack on this city, and that attack could happen anytime now. Ambulances on standby, hospitals on standby. Preeti, I also went to the church here, and the church is now chipping in, giving food and shelter to refugees. The church is also, Preeti, preparing hospital beds. Church is preparing to look after people who may be injured in combat. Whether civilians or soldiers, we do not know. The hope that at least a religious institution, the 10th century church, will not be targeted either in artillery, grad, rocket or even missile fire.
The city is witnessing unending, blaring air raid sirens, followed by deafening roars of air attacks. Hit by one barrage of missiles and rockets after another.
Some damage that has been suffered by the Russian side as well. Can you hear the firing? Can you hear the firing right now?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Shots, can you see? They're very close. They're in the center, city center of Kyiv right now. It's in very close. They're just about a kilometer away, right in the city center of Kyiv right now. Okay, please continue.
Air raid siren, Rajesh?
No, it was firing.
Russia struck the TV tower in Kyiv on Tuesday that killed 5 people and wounded 5 more. TV channels across the country stopped broadcasting after the attack, aimed at crippling Ukraine's broadcast network. Earlier, Russia had issued a warning that it would strike Kyiv's security service headquarters with high-precision weapons. Residents living close by were asked to flee immediately. How long can the Ukrainian capital and its small band of soldiers and residents resist the unsparing Russian onslaught? With Gaurav Sawant and Rajesh Pawar, the only reporters still on the ground in besieged Kyiv. Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, joining me now in the India Today War Room, I want to just introduce you to our distinguished military minds who will give us a sense of what's happening in Kharkiv, what's happening in Kyiv, what happened today and what could happen next. So let me introduce Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, Distinguished Fellow at the Center for Land Warfare Studies. Welcome, sir. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, former Chief of the Integrated Defence Staff. We've got Air Marshal V.K. Bhatia, former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Air Command. But I first want to go across to our man on the ground. Gaurav Sawant joins us live from Kyiv. Gaurav, you're in this car and this is one of the marvels of modern technology. Please tell me where you're going, what's happening around you, and that convoy which was coming, which we were discussing yesterday, Gaurav, this 60-kilometer long convoy. It seemed as if the Russians were coming in and intended to use that convoy to devastating effect. That battle hasn't begun yet. What do you think is going on in Kyiv?
Rahul, two things extremely significant at this point of time. One, that convoy that was expected, that convoy apparently, from what officials here, and we've been speaking to a number of officials here in Ukraine from the army and the militia. So their appreciation of the battle is that the Russians are first trying to sort Kharkiv out completely, regroup and then target Kyiv. They do not want to open multiple fronts. They do not want to fight on multiple flanks. They've already, from the south, they've sorted Odessa. They've got Mariupol, Donetsk and Luhansk area is where the intense fighting is being reported, or the Russians claim to have an upper hand. In Kharkiv, massive artillery battles are likely to start, and all Indians have been asked to vacate Kharkiv by 1600 hours local time, which is around 9:30 IST. So after that, operations will intensify. Rahul, we were in Kyiv, in the heart of Kyiv through the day today, and now we are driving back to the suburbs. It's much safer, or it is hoped that the suburbs are safer. We have once again been told by officials here that we should leave for Lviv because, the battle could intensify for Kyiv. Rahul, the apprehension on ground is that Kyiv operations will begin in the next 24 to 48 hours once Kharkiv has been addressed effectively. Punitive strikes, as Ukrainian officials now tell us, that these were punitive strikes on Kharkiv to demoralize the Ukrainian army and the people so that they don't put up a stiff resistance when Kyiv is targeted. On the contrary, through the day we've traveled with the Ukrainian army, militia, reported on their defenses, and they are saying this has only strengthened their resolve to fight the Russians and not give up without a fight. They insist they will fight to the last man and last bullet. You've seen our report on how trenches are being dug, how defenses are being built, multiple concrete barriers and boulders being set up, and they're only hoping that the Western countries would provide the ATGMs and the SAMs as quickly as possible, the anti-tank guided missiles and the surface-to-air missiles that will help them, and other disruptive technology, including UCAVs, that they so desperately require, Rahul.
Okay, we'll come back to you, Gaurav, for more. Stay safe, stay well, and put safety first. That's most important. I want to now go across to the military minds with us in the India Today War Room. I want to show you the satellite images of the mobilization which was heading towards Kyiv. And I want to ask Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma first about how is this battle likely to play out? Across the country, everyone's wondering, Kyiv mein kya hoga? What will happen in Kyiv? From what you've seen in the satellite images, from what you know about the armor that's coming towards Kyiv, how do you think this battle is likely to play out?
Okay, thank you, Gaurav, for inviting. The fact of the matter is that there is this convoy of 40 kilometers or 65 kilometers, which is lined up there for last 48 hours. I wouldn't call it a convoy. To me, it looks like a traffic jam in Delhi. It's not moving. It's like Barapula, which is stuck up there.
That's interesting. Why do you say that?
Because you can't have a convoy of 60 kilometers in a 100-kilometer road from Belarus to Kyiv just stuck there for 48 hours.
So what are they doing?
So is it a good ruse?
Or is it just intimidation? They're trying to show you their muscle.
It's kind of coercion. Otherwise, they should have melted away on the side. You can't have lined up, vehicles, air vehicles and otherwise, and logistic stuff lined up in one road, even if they don't have an air force. But there would be people who use Molotov cocktails.
No, but they have javelins, they have Stinger missiles. So they can use those, and some of those tanks can just go up.
So the fact of the matter is that it is either a logistics convoy or it doesn't matter in case they lose it. Otherwise, it's foolish to no vehicle in a war zone of 60 kilometers are lined up and kept like this ever in life.
I've never heard something like this. It can't be like the Barapulla traffic jam. For those who don't know, Barapulla is this road that connects Delhi and Noida. I think that's where the general's coming from. He must have been stuck in the traffic jam. He says on the satellite image it looks like a traffic jam. That's interesting. General Dua, what's your sense of how this Battle of Kyiv is likely to shape up?
Look,
what will they most likely do?
So the point is, whether this convoy or not, when they enter or they try to enter Kyiv, whatever may have been the progress of battle so far, Kyiv is the center of gravity. It is the center of power, it is the capital city. And it is at Kyiv that they will have to face the stiffest resistance. Let's also not forget, you can get tanks and aircrafts and sophisticated weapon and equipment, but fighting in built-up areas is done street by street, house by house, mohalla by mohalla, and that is a tough call and a very different thing.
You have so many citizens with guns. They can open fire from any window.
They'll have Molotov cocktails. Like this, a couple of hours ago, I was talking to Gaurav Sawant on Aaj Tak, and he said कि Molotov cocktails है, अगर हथियार कहते हैं कि हथियार नहीं है तो हम जज्बे से लड़ेंगे. The kind of resistance that they are bound to put up over here is going to be of a very different order. And let's also not forget, let's also remember the lessons that the world has learned, or the militaries should have learned from Vietnam, from Afghanistan. So,
but those are different terrains. The built-up area is not as much. You don't have as many high rises.
I'm talking of in built-up areas.
Okay.
In built-up areas there also, whether it was...
But they're not high-rises, not cities.
They're not high-rises. Here, in fact, it makes it tougher.
Yeah.
In high-rises, it makes it even tougher. So the point I'm trying to make, that Kyiv, to my mind, will not be a walkover, despite the forces that come in.
Will they come in from a few flanks? Do you think they'll try and surround the city? How is that attack likely to happen?
True. They will certainly come in from more than one directions. How many directions they can take will remains to be seen. But
what do you think of Russian military tactics so far? Just from the outside, some of it very befuddling. One, they don't seem to attack at night, raising questions about whether they have adequate night vision devices. Secondly, they send airborne paratroopers in for dramatic operations. Supply chains don't fetch up at the back.
Absolutely.
And the paratroopers are stuck and then they're having to disperse. This just seems, this seems not like the Russian army.
Absolutely. The link-ups did not take place and they had to actually withdraw from the airport. The convoys that General Rakesh Sharma commented upon, if that's the logistic
Why are they
convoy,
making these mistakes?
So why have they kept the western border open?
Absolutely.
Why are they allowing things to come from Poland, from Moldova?
What could they do? What should they do?
So, I mean, are they leaving the areas open for the West to supply equipment?
Why would they do that?
So, I mean, there is often one would say, one doesn't know, history will tell us what happens. But often I will say that there is a planning flaw and they don't want to go largely beyond the Dnieper River.
No, but then allowing for all these Stinger missiles to come in, javelins to come in,
so there is,
and at some point in time, these are easier to use. They'll be used to devastating effect against you. You're not being able to stop the entry points.
So there is a flaw in that you can't allow the access points into the country non-contested. There is an issue here, which means they don't want to go beyond the Russian areas of the Dnieper River, except for the southern areas of these three ports.
So can I just show that on a map? And if you can come over here, what you're saying is that essentially they don't want to cross the river, don't want to come towards places like Lviv, which is why from places like Poland, from places like Hungary, weapon systems are being sent in at this moment unchecked, and both of you are finding that very problematic.
So, except for the areas of these three ports of Odessa, Mailkov, and of course, Mariupol. The three and Kherson. Kherson, the war
Kherson
is on.
Already taken nearly.
So, other than the southern areas, they're not trying to venture. Of course, one of the thrusts came from Belarus down on the western side of Kyiv River, and one came from the tri-junction of the river. But other than that, they are not ventured across. Hitting an odd strike at some place doesn't mean that they want business across the river. This is the Russian areas, and this is the line that they want to hold on. That's the impression one gets.
No, but what purpose does it serve? Explain this to me.
Building on
one second, sir. Vladimir Putin sees himself as the modern-day Tsar. You go into Ukraine after all the bluff and bluster, and you can, if at most, end up with only half the country. How does Vladimir Putin go back claiming he's won?
So those are the areas, actually those are the Russian-dominated areas.
Sure.
And they want to be, and they want to, that is the reason why they want to limit the battle up to Dnieper River. But my point is, as a military man, I feel, even if this is your objective, there is no reason to not activate west of it as far as progressing the battle is concerned.
Now, what could they do? Air power, you mean?
Air power? They need to, like they did try from Belarus side, they need to actually also open up fronts over here.
They have to open up fronts on the excess roads that come from these areas. Otherwise, if you see all the weapon systems the West is promising them, they will start trickling in from these roads from where...
They're already coming, sir. They're already coming with speed.
So, you know, it doesn't matter to them. These things can come here. But he doesn't want... See, the threat to Russia is that there is a possibility of these open lands. There's a threat to Moscow is about 300 kilometers here. So he is resting himself, hopefully.
Yep.
I mean, 6 months will tell us. He is resting himself on the river because river is formidable obstacle. And he is not wanting to say, you can bring anything out here. But I will not allow you to go across the river.
No, but that's half a battle. If at all he's able to establish control over the eastern and southern part of the country, Vladimir Putin doesn't get to claim victory.
No, but also what happens is that if you go too far beyond, your supply, your logistics gets too extended. So they're also taking, they're taking good lessons from the previous battles or previous drawbacks that they've had. So they don't want the, but the point again, what General Sharma also said, is to rest over here, they must first open fronts over here, eventually come and stabilize on this line, is the way I would look at it.
Marshal Bhatia, explain the role of air power in this. The Russians largely control the skies, but they don't seem to have air dominance at this moment. They seem to have just about air superiority. Explain the difference, and how do you see air power played out?
You see, I look at the whole thing slightly differently.
Yes.
To my mind, when Russia went into Ukraine, I think they had limited objectives. That is number one. Number two, they did not want to use their entire military power for two reasons. One, they were hoping that it will not last too long and that they'll be able to get hold of President Zelensky and will be able to change the regime.
So can you just shift towards the camera? That's it. Yeah.
But the point here I'm trying to make is that they did not use their entire power. Now,
why is the Air Force, according to you, largely unused right now?
You see, the Air Force has been used, but in a very calibrated manner. But to my mind, what appears is that Russia does not want to do too much of destruction in the country. They were hoping that they will be able to, have a kind of a walkover into the country and be able to get their military objectives. And what were those military objectives? Basically, change of regime and the fact that Ukraine must stay within their sphere of influence and not join NATO.
You know, there's this report that we compiled on some of the befuddling actions by the Russian army, which analysts are describing as mistakes possibly, which are the difference between what the Russian army, or at least Vladimir Putin, would have hoped for and what's happening on the ground in this battlefield. Abhishek Bhalla, our defense editor, with this report.
The country of Ukraine putting up a fight back against the mighty Russians. With sheer grit and determination, Ukraine has held back Russian troops and an invasion that was expected to be a complete walkover for Kremlin. Many reports have suggested that Putin wanted a quick invasion, but that clearly hasn't happened, with many claims that the Russian army has already suffered huge casualties. Here are 5 reasons why Russian forces are struggling right now with their Ukraine takeover plan. Reason 1, Putin's secrecy. While things were simmering between NATO and Russia and war seemed inevitable, reportedly, Putin played his cards close to his chest.
I've taken the decision to conduct a special military operation. Its purpose is to protect people who have been subject to abuse and genocide by the Kyiv regime for 8 years. And to do this, we will strive to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine.
This announcement by Putin took his own generals by surprise, as the Russian president didn't divulge to anyone his war plans. While the secrecy could have been for strategic reasons, it reportedly led to a lack of preparation on ground. Reason 2, lack of planning. This is a mountain of damaged Russian vehicles in Bucha city of Ukraine. If Russia has the military advantage, how has this happened? And why has Russia suffered so many casualties? Russia has way more troops, way more advanced equipment, and yet haven't managed to get the upper hand in urban warfare. The fact that Ukraine's internet services haven't been down yet is a telling indication. Reason 3, overconfidence. A Ukrainian stopping a Russian military convoy. Ukrainian President Zelensky standing his ground and refusing to back off. Ukrainian troops using all the equipment they have to fight back. Russia quite simply underestimated the enemy. With no military support from NATO, America or any other country, Putin perhaps anticipated things would be wrapped up very, very fast. But the war is still very much on, 7 days and counting. Reason 4, restrained air power. Yes, Russia has struck many targets from the skies, with precision airstrikes targeting key military installations. Experts have opined, however, that Russia is yet to use its full military might against Ukraine. And perhaps in the days to come, Putin may be forced to pull out all his arsenal to seal the deal for his country. Reason 5, Europe's response. Sanction after sanction by European countries is hitting Russia hard, and it's evident in the ruble currency's massive drop in value. Add to that is Europe rallying behind Ukraine with expensive weapons like the Stinger anti-aircraft and Javelin anti-tank missiles also being offered to Ukraine. Russia's invasion so far hasn't happened as planned, and Ukraine's full-fledged fight back was perhaps not anticipated. One thing is clear, this war has had huge military and political repercussions for Putin and his country. Bureau Report, India Today.
We've spoken so far about what's likely to happen at Kyiv, the capital. I want to spend some time talking about what's happening in Kharkiv, in the northern part of the country. And on this map, I want to show our viewers the kind of attacks that we've seen already. Multiple bombs being launched, missiles being launched, largely at military targets or government targets, not so much at civilian installations. General Dua, to you first. The Battle of Kharkiv, the last time Kharkiv was under siege was 80 years ago during the Second World War. We're seeing history repeat itself. About 30,000 people died at that time. How do you see this battle play itself out? How long can the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian army hold out in Kharkiv?
Well, by the reports that we hear in the media, that's our only source, Kharkiv has suffered a lot of setback, losses, casualty. Well, the figures of casualties, we will really not know. We won't be able to verify it till much after the war, because today what we hear, the claims and counterclaims, and we don't know how much of it is information warfare, because a lot of it is amounting to information warfare and shaping the perceptions, etc. So we may not know the exact amount of casualties, but devastation has taken place. But does that mean that this is oversimplification to say the Kharkiv has been lost totally? Because there will be pockets of resistance. It is a built-up area. It is a city. It's the second largest.
Do they have enough boots on the ground to be able to hold the city?
So that's exactly the point I'm making. To destroy it with standoff weapons, destroy buildings, reduce it to rubble is one thing. But to actually get into the heart of the matter, to get into the building where everyone is throwing a Molotov cocktail, someone's taking a pot shot. So the progress is
across
actually
such a big built-up area. It's not one village in Kashmir that you are trying to secure. This is a whole city. Kyiv has 4 million people to go in. Even if several lakh have gone away, there's still a substantial population left. They're very hostile, they're very angry, and they're willing to risk their lives. General Sharma.
Yeah, so the fact of the matter is that Kharkiv is a Russian-speaking city. These are Russian-speaking areas. So right from beginning, as Air Marshal Bhatia was saying, that first 4-day battle, which was an easy battle for them, they thought that the government will capitulate. And the Russian people will rise up.
It's like
जैसे वो पाकिस्तान के साथ हुआ था ना, you know, 65 war में, the Kashmir will rise up, and you know, that rising up didn't happen. Even the Kashmiri बोल रहा हूँ ना, this Russian-speaking people didn't rise up. So that's a
but
great
if you bomb them, they'll be angry as hell with you.
Yeah, so the fact of the matter is that Kharkiv is now a city which has not responded the way the Russians were hoping they'll respond. One issue. Second is very heartening MEA, the thing which came up 2 hours ago. What did he say? He said all Indians have got a 3-hour window to get out from wherever they are hiding, and we have sorted out with the Russian military there on ground and start moving.
That's quite incredible. Can I just have that map? I'll show that to our viewers. Remember what happened is Prime Minister Modi spoke to Vladimir Putin, and from what the MEA said, and obviously it would have happened for them to say so officially, they've secured a concession from the Russian army that these Indian boys and girls can actually get out. 3 areas have been given that in either of these areas, whether it is Babai, whether it is Beluzutkwa, which is 16 kilometers away, or it is Pisochin, on any of these exit routes, get out. That's quite significant.
15 kilometers are normally they're saying you're going to walk, but 2 hours it will take you to walk. But the time window given out is only 3 hours. So which means.
But does this message reach in real time to these Indians who are there?
So all those who have registered with the embassy, it has gone as an SMS to all. Those who have not registered with the embassy, those are word to mouth.
But now we're in a social media era. Many of them are watching India Today, would be tracking what's happening.
Which actually means that you require a coordinator now. Actually, if you get Indians there in 3 places you mentioned here, you require a coordinator to coordinate their evacuation from this place back towards.
That's quite a significant operation that's being mounted. We want to keep our fingers crossed and hope that nothing goes wrong.
Or get the students to create a leader. Because, you know, you are...
So, how are they going to...
The fact is when there are 3 designated...
Actually, it should be coordinated in such a manner with the people who are actually doing it. Some of those people should come into Kharkiv. And
from where?
From outside, from these places. I'm talking about the embassy people. Okay. They should come and to be able to get these people together and then take them out, rather than leaving it to the students to go individually.
Can I show our viewers what's happening with these Indian students who are in Kharkiv, which is in some senses their educational hub, as it were. Most of the Indian students there are very scared, rattled, anxious, desperate to get out. Now this window being created for them, and we've got our fingers crossed, and we're hoping that as many as is possible are able to make it out.
I'm here to welcome you all back on behalf of every Indian. Welcome back home.
Special flights bringing Indians stranded in war-torn Ukraine lands in New Delhi. Union Minister Smriti Irani welcomed the 218 passengers, mostly students, returning via Bucharest at the Delhi airport. Operation Ganga, launched by Narendra Modi government to bring back stranded Indians, is now in top gear.
बहुत ज़्यादा खुशी हो रही है, बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रगल करके आए हैं और पेरेंट्स को देखा है तो बहुत ज़्यादा खुश हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा. I'm from Bukovina State Medical University. IISS students helped us a lot, and the Indian Embassy was there also. So thank you so much to everyone, and yeah, we are so glad that we are landed safely here.
Border cross करने मुझे 2 दिन लग गया, बहुत मुश्किल से किया. इसका जैसे border cross किया बहुत आराम से सब कुछ हो गया.
For the parents here awaiting their loved ones, the rescue mission is a huge relief.
तो सरकार का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद है. मोदी सरकार ने इतना अच्छा कार्य किया बच्चों को निकाल. माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी हरियाणा सरकार बहुत अच्छा लगा जी. सरकार ने बहुत कोऑपरेट किया, हमारे बच्चों को निकाला. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद गवर्नमेंट का.
The centre has deployed 4 ministers to the neighbouring states of Ukraine to oversee the evacuation efforts.
भारत ने अपने 4 मंत्रियों को भी वहां पर भेज दिया है. संकट में फंसे भारतीयों को ज्यादा तेजी से निकालने के लिए हमारी सेना, वायु सेना को भी लगा दिया गया है.
आता तुम्ही सुरक्षित जा.
Union Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia reached Bucharest as the special envoy to the Indian government.
Sindhya interacted with Indian students awaiting their flights and assured them of safe return.
सिरेट में 3 फ्लाइट्स में कल ला रहा हूँ सुचेवा में, तो बच्चों को यहाँ आने की जरूरत नहीं है, सुचेवा से ही हम लोग इंडिया रवाना कर देंगे.
The Indian Air Force has also joined Operation Ganga. C-17 aircraft have left for Romania to bring Indians crossing over from Ukraine.
MEA के साथ पूरे कोऑर्डिनेशन के साथ ये ऑपरेशन चल रहा है कैपेसिटी इंक्रीज करने के लिए जैसे जैसे बिकॉज हमको सारे अपने सिटीजन्स मैनी ऑफ देम जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं उनको लाना है तो प्राइमरली C-17 करेंगे जो डायरेक्ट जा सकता है.
Ukraine has shut its airspace for civilian flights. India is evacuating its stranded citizens through Poland, Hungary and Romania. Over 3,000 Indian nationals are still stuck in Kharkiv, where Russia is pounding non-stop missiles. India has requested Russia for emergency evacuation of stranded Indians through Russian territory, which is hardly 40 kilometers away.
We have received the Indian requests for the emergency evacuation of all those stuck there.
If Russia allows safe passage for Indian students, Operation Ganga will get a huge boost. Right now, the government is racing against time as it tries to evacuate every single Indian from Ukraine before the big Russian blitz. With Paulami Saha and Geeta Mohan in New Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
Very critical window of opportunity for Indian students to get out. Remember, India abstaining in the United Nations Security Council, also at the General Assembly, when it came to these resolutions against the Russian invasion, that paying back in some senses with this window of opportunity being created for Indian citizens to get out. I'm slipping into a very quick break. When we come back, Russia once again reiterating that its nuclear strategic forces are on a state of alert. So what's the difference between strategic nuclear forces, non-strategic nuclear forces, and how seriously should you take this nuclear threat? Is it just nuclear saber-rattling, or is there more? We'll ask these sharp military minds about this and more when we come back on the other side of a quick break. You're watching the Newstrack. Nuclear threat. It's been said by President Putin, it was said by the defense minister, the foreign minister, constantly being reiterated. Is it just posturing, or given the manner in which Putin's gone into Ukraine, is the nuclear deterrent something that needs to be taken very seriously?
Look, I mean, nuclear deterrent has got to be taken seriously always.
Correct.
It's very serious business. As to why it has been put into, forces have been put on alert.
So quickly into the war?
No, it's every country has a nuclear doctrine, a nuclear policy.
What is Russia's nuclear
So, for instance, for India, it is no first use.
Correct.
For Pakistan,
which Parikar spoke about wanting to revise the review.
For Pakistan, it is essentially called for existential threat.
And even tactical nuclear.
Absolutely. And they use tactical nuclear. In Russian nuclear doctrine, they bring in their nuclear preparedness very early, if you read their doctrine. So the point is, we are just 7 days into the war. The last time it was used, and the only time it was used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was after 6 years of war. Nothing has happened at a very high macro level. Nothing much has happened here. Just a couple of cities are still enmeshed in war. That nuclear threat can be called into play. Preparedness is a matter of military levels of preparedness that they've set into
motion. So
motion.
what we know is that the strategic forces of the nuclear defense forces of Russia have been put in alert, and I'll get General Sharma to explain that, but broadly strategic forces are those that can target continental United States, for example. Non-strategic forces are those that can target Europe. So when that message is going, is it essentially to suggest to President Biden and everybody else in the NATO alliance, don't you dare come into a place like Lviv or anywhere into Ukraine, because if you do, then you're crossing a nuclear threshold?
So why didn't the Americans and then NATO react to this threat? He said deterrence forces, that's the word used. They didn't react. So they have retained their posture which was existing earlier. Even now when the Russians say that they are in the deterrence mode, there are 3 more stages to go before...
What does the deterrence mode mean? Explain that to us.
It means so they are ready. They are ready in a form. But whether
but
they...
I read an intel report from US intelligence which says that they haven't actually moved, for example, the warhead's not been brought into the missile.
They're not mated. Correct. And then also there are 3 more stages to go before they actually get ready for nuclear targeting.
What are these stages?
So the mating of weapons, then getting the weapons to be moved to the right places, and then get the folks across to fire it. It's a system to it. That system is not
like
ready.
It is called like the green, yellow, amber, and then red. So these are different stages of preparedness.
So right now we're in green.
So they have just moved one notch up, where he has said for them to be ready. Okay. So maybe they have
moved. Is he just bluffing, or how seriously would you take it? Putin seems a bit deluded at this moment.
Rahul, I feel that basically what Russia wants to give a sort of a signal that NATO should not get involved in this.
But NATO said we're not coming. Biden said it in his State of the Union this morning.
Yeah, but he said it 6 months ago. I wish that time he had not said we are not coming. Maybe that would have been deterrent. You know, when the American intelligence said that these chaps are going to launch an offensive, if the intelligence was so solid, that time we should have reacted. The intelligence was solid, but the analysis and actions were poor of the West. They should have moved some forces across into these areas into doing things. And I also feel that President Putin, due respect to him, he's in some kind of a bubble. He's kind of a...
He's not talking to people. When he meets someone, he's sitting on one corner of this huge table. The other person's on the other side, almost across the LOC. No, but it's true. He's like a mile away. Yes.
So that's the bubble he's created. He's got people stand off.
And he's so scared of his own health, and look at how he's jeopardizing the health of all these Ukrainians.
Yeah, his own health is good.
You know, in fact, it's interesting as a historical observation that what happened in the Second World War, it's the same places like Kharkiv, like Kyiv, that are seeing the brunt of this attack again. At that time, it was the German Nazi army that was coming in, the Russians trying to fight back. The Russian army ultimately lost, the Nazi army won in these cities. We went back into military history to compile this report for you, to give you a sense of what happened in these urban pockets way back in the 40s.
Almost 80 years after the war clouds had receded, Ukraine was again under attack. A throwback to the times of terror when the land and its people had been brutalized by Nazi occupation. That Ukraine was unprepared for war in 2022 harks back to the horrors that Ukraine faced during the Second World War. Ukraine never imagined that they would face occupation once again. The numbers speak for themselves. An estimated 3.5 million civilian inhabitants of Soviet Ukraine were victims of German killing policies between 1941 and 1945. Another 3 million Ukrainians died directly as soldiers in the Soviet Red Army fighting the Nazis, or died as a consequence of the war. Entire Ukraine had been occupied by Nazi Germany. And on the eve of invasion in 1941, Ukraine was home to the largest Jewish population in Europe. Hitler's Germany sent special forces called Einsatzgruppen with orders to kill civilians perceived to be enemies of Nazi Germany. They identified the Jews in Ukraine and shot most of them to death close to where they lived. Unlike in other parts of occupied Europe, the Jews of Ukraine were not deported to distant camps. The Jews in Ukraine were taken from their homes to the outskirts of the cities, towns, and villages where they lived, and shot, often in the presence of local residents. 1 in every 4 Jewish victims of the Holocaust was murdered in Ukraine. On September 19, 1941, German forces entered the city of Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine. At that time, the population of Kyiv was 800,000, out of which about 160,000 were Jews representing some 20% of the city's population. 100,000 Jews either fled or joined the Red Army when the invasion began. The 60,000 who were left were mostly women, children, and the aged. Ten days later, on September 29-30th, 1941, a large portion of the remaining Jewish population in Kyiv were rounded up and transported to a ravine called Babi Yar, located just outside the city. The victims were forced to undress and made to enter the ravine. A special commando unit shot them in small groups. In those 2 days, 33,771 Jews of Kyiv were executed. Ukraine suffered under invasion. While its Jews were killed, the rest of the population too was brutalized. Industry was allowed to deteriorate, and the country was deprived of food and all available resources, which were all directed to support the German war effort. 2.2 million people were sent from Ukraine to Germany as slave labor. The tide of war on the Eastern Front began to turn in 1943. The Red Army had stalled Hitler at Stalingrad, and the pushback had begun. Hitler ordered that an eastern wall of defensive preparations be made along the Dnieper River. The river was a natural boundary for German forces to fall back on following their retreat from the Volga and Stalingrad. The Red Army launched a massive offensive in August 1943 along a 1,400-kilometer wide front. 2.6 million Soviet troops marched westwards. The German army fell back to their defensive positions on the Dnieper. The fighting was fierce, and by the end of 1943, USSR had regained control of the Crimea and Ukraine, but at terrible cost. More than 400,000 dead, more than 1 million injured. The exact Nazi losses were never collaborated. Every Ukrainian family had stories that went back to the times of bloodshed 80 years ago. And yet, the Ukraine of 2022 is once again under attack. Another invasion is on. The horrors that had been all but forgotten have re-entered people's lives with a bang. For those watching Ukraine suffer, the visuals this time are all in color.
You know, it's very sorry to see what happened in the World War now get repeated in these very, very horrific circumstances. I want to thank these military minds for joining us, General Sharma Janandua, M.R. Bhatia for joining us. We will keep doing this because what you're able to do in the India Today War Room is get a sense of what's happening on the battlefield. And that's the question that's occupying minds all across this country. We'll track this war like absolutely nobody else is. I'm slipping into a break, wrapping up the Newstrack. Rashdeep Sardesai comes up next. Stay with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.